Well, hey guys, welcome and thank you to another episode of Free Thinking with Montel. I'm your host today, Montel Williams, of course, and we have a very special treat for you. We're going to explore the themes of holding on too tight, losing one's way, and the power of making the decision to leave everything behind for a fresh start. My guest today is the former director of the Center of Advanced Lung Disease and Lung Heart Transplant program at Stanford University Medical Center. He's also an accomplished author with his new novel, All That Really Matters, hitting the shelves really soon. Dr. David Weill, thank you so much, sir, for being a part of the show today. David, thank you so much for being a part of the show today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Why don't you talk to us a little bit? Tell me a little bit about your background, where you're from, where'd you grow up, where'd you go to school? And then you had this incredibly impactful career in medicine. Can you tell me a little bit about your transition from a transplant surgeon to author? So that's a lot to cover in one question, but yeah, help me out.
Yeah, so I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm the son of a nurse and a doctor, so I grew up in a medical family. I always wanted to be a doctor, started working in hospitals when I was 15 years old. Went to medical school and fell in love ultimately with transplantation. And I spent my entire career in the transplant field, most of it, as you pointed out, at Stanford. I had about a 20-year rip in the field where I was intensely involved with transplantation, and then decided several years ago to make a career change. And part of the reason is I wanted to write about some of the experiences that I had in the hospital. And I also wanted to help out transplant programs that were struggling. So I became more coach than quarterback at that point.
And let's back up that period of time in your life. I mean, I just can't imagine being responsible for another human being's life going through this kind of a process. I mean, you literally are doing something that, 40 years ago was completely inconceivable. And you're now taking organs from one person, putting them in another person, knowing the fact that one person had to die to give life to another person, but at the same time, knowing that that person who's getting the life, I don't know. It's really fun. I don't know enough about transplantation to understand whether or not, there's a 60%, success rate, 80, 70, 90. What's the success rate? And what do you go through as a doctor having to do that?
Well, the magic of transplant and the responsibility of it was never lost on me. I carried around a waiting list with patients' names on it my entire career, and it felt like a heavy weight in my pocket a lot of the times, to be quite frank. But, I watched the field develop from the early 90s when I got involved in it to where it is today. And we've really made a lot of improvements in all the solid organ transplants, not just heart and lung. And so it's been gratifying, to see those experiences. But when it came time for me to turn to the page and write about some of these things, I wanted to talk about patient stories, certainly, and the magic of what we did. It's the ultimate reset that our patients get when they get a second chance at life. But I also wanted to talk about what the experience is like for the people providing that kind of care. And so in both of my books, I really talk about the team dynamics, the interpersonal relationships that happen when you're, in a high stress situation where the stakes are very high.
And this has got to be incredibly high stress. First off, you're literally waiting along with a patient who's, and again, and please correct me if I'm using bad terminology or things that should not be said. But I mean, honestly, a person is waiting for another person to pass away. And then they get this notice, so-and-so passed away and the lungs are coming from here. And, then they got to get to you. And then from you, they got to get to a prep station. And then from a prep station, they got to prep the other patient. This is crazy. It's something out of a sci-fi movie to me. And I've often wondered, when you talk about it, it's a team that does this, but everybody along the way has major stress. The person flying the organs in, the person transporting the organs from the plane to the hospital, from the hospital to from the door of the emergency room to the operating room, all those kinds of things. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a multi-step process. There are a lot of moving parts involved, and I felt like an air traffic controller a lot of the time when I'm trying to land the planes. And I think that what's really interesting is you see people at their very best, and sometimes not their very best. And also, we call patients in the middle of the night and tell them, "Now's your time. Come to the hospital, like right now."
Sometimes they're at home. Sometimes are they at the hospital, or are they most of the time at the hospital, or most of the time at home?
Both. They're sometimes in the hospital. They're so sick that they have to stay in the hospital. Sometimes they wait at home. I found patients, really anywhere that you and I would go, and
Right.
we have to tell them to come to the hospital right away. I tell them not to get in a car wreck on the way there, but to
Right.
to hurry along.
Just anecdotally, could you? You don't have to give the names of the patient, but walk. I have so many questions for you, and I'm fascinated. I clearly see. Walk me through one patient, and again, if I'm asking the wrong question, you correct me, sir, please. Walk me through a patient that was, let's say, went perfectly. It's the way it's supposed to go, and then walk me through the one that was like, oh my God, am I going to get through this? Walk me through a couple of the cases that you've worked on.
Well, I'll tell you about a patient that's near and dear to my heart. My father received a liver transplant early on in my career, and I was sitting there waiting with him when he got the call. We were watching a football game on TV, and he was in Colorado, and we basically had to get him to the hospital that I was working at, that I was also doing a transplant that night, and he was about 2 or 3 weeks from dying
Oh,
with liver disease. He had hepatitis C from a bad blood transfusion. And so he gets off the plane, he goes into the operating room, and I tell this story in my first book, Exhale. And he tells me, "Look, I mean, I may not make it through this. Is there anything that I haven't told you that you need to know from me?" And I sent him off to get surgery. He did perfectly well. He did great. He was out of the hospital in 5 days, and we had him for an extra 12 years, and
is
that's
that,
magic.
or was he, did he get the liver from a living donor? I know there's that process where they can cut out another person's liver in half and it comes.
No, Montel. It's an interesting story because he actually got a liver from a patient that had a motorcycle accident,
Oh,
and actually, my team transplanted the lungs from the same patient that night.
oh
So
wow.
it was an interesting night. But there's hundreds of success stories where we take people that had hours or weeks or days to live and we save them. But there were also the patients that I'm afraid didn't even make it to the starting line. They died on the waiting list. And
Wow.
right now in lung transplantation, 1 in 5 patients that we list is going to die on the waiting list. And so
Wow.
I encourage everyone to please sign up for organ donation. It's really important. And
When you say that, can you give out where they should go if they want to sign up? Because you're going to move people during this conversation to want to do something. So where should they go?
the best thing to do is to tell your family that that's what you want, because you're not going to be in a position to have your wishes known at that point. If you
Okay.
tell your family and you find yourself you're in a situation to donate, they can actually consent to donation knowing that that's what you wanted. But a lot of families are unsure. So right now, when we ask people to donate, it's only a 50-50 proposition about whether they will or they won't.
That sounds crazy. Wow, you would think that more people. I mean, I don't know. I guess there are religious reasons and spiritual reasons and other reasons that some people have, or and in some cases, just selfish reasons. I literally would be okay with them taking any part of me out of me if they wanted to. However, I think I'm not a good candidate for transplantation because I do have an existing, the illness that's MS. That I guess would that disqualify me?
No, it really wouldn't. I mean,
But see,
I
that's something I didn't know.
I think the best thing is to let the transplant teams decide. In other words, consent for organ donation, and we as transplant teams, that's our job, is to decide if the organs that you or anyone else has are usable.
Absolutely. And I want to get into your books here in just a second, but let's talk about the state of transplantation as it is today. I mean, I read articles from here and now, every now and then. I'm fascinated by them when I start to hear about all of these organs that are being actually grown inside of other types of their cross species kinds of things. There are organs that they're making. I've heard these stories about we're going to be in a position to 3D print organs. Give me an idea. Take away some of the myths and tell me some of the truths.
Yeah, there's something called xenotransplantation that you refer to as taking an animal organ and putting it into a human. And you can see in the newspapers that those individual cases are really starting to happen. Finally, we've been talking about it for decades, but finally we've got the technology now where we can actually genetically modify the organs from an animal and make them compatible for a human being. That's a huge breakthrough. And that is all due to the basic science that was behind that. What we need in that area is larger scale clinical trials. One case is fine, two cases is fine, but we need larger scale clinical trials, and that's coming down the pike. But you're also right that we're going to be able to manufacture organs, and that's already starting as well. So we're going through a period in transplantation where the field could look entirely differently if we had this conversation 10 years from now than it's looked in for the last 30 that I've been involved in it.
Even in as far as rejection and all those kinds of things go. I mean, I know there's you go back 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was all that talk about the fact that you could get the organ, but then again you have to now fight the fact that the body was going to reject it. And I guess we've made some breakthroughs in medication and things like that to help the host be able to hold on to that organ longer. I mean, is there breakthroughs now? Because I've been hearing some things about that coming out of Hopkins and other places where they've been doing kidney transplants, and they've been able to find a better way to allow that to not be rejected.
Absolutely. The medications continue to improve. Our ability to genetically modify the organs so that they don't reject has also developed. The immune system that we as humans have is very sophisticated and very difficult to trick. But I'm encouraged that we're getting better and better at that. So you see less and less rejection. When I started, rejection was incredibly common. I mean, it was almost universally happening, and we just had to work around it. That's not the case anymore. Much better.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, now your book, Exhale, is a riveting memoir that dives deep into some of the most emotional moments in your career. But now you've ventured into the fiction world with All That Really Matters. What inspires you to change from factual to fiction?
I think that with my first book, I was able to explain, especially my own personal experience, the emotional roller coaster that you alluded to about the work I did. But I wanted to explore some of the themes more deeply. And I think fiction gave me that latitude. Obviously, if I'm writing a nonfiction work in my memoir and I'm trying to not offend folks and not call out the system, I think there was some constraints to it. With my novel, I was really able to delve into not only the interpersonal issues that happen in hospitals every day, but also some of the larger issues that are happening with our healthcare system that I'm really concerned about.
Let's talk a little bit about some of those concerns. What are some of those concerns?
I think the central one, Montel, is the placement of profit over purpose in our healthcare system. I think that there is such a big business element to this, and I have no problem with folks that make money in any legal and ethical way that they can. But I'm afraid it's tipped over in healthcare to being mostly about money. And so if you look at the problems in healthcare, whether it's access, whether it's socioeconomic and racial disparities, you name it, most of it relates to money. And I'm afraid that some of our bigger industries, the insurance industries, the hospital administration industries, have really put profits over the purpose of why we're all in this is to help other humans.
And when you start talking about, we're reaching a point here in America where, from a societal standpoint, we're kind of reaching a point where our numbers are greater than the services available, are they not?
And no doubt about it. And I think that we've seen, it's almost a $5 trillion industry in the US right now. It's 20% of our GDP. And it's very difficult to change something like that. We nibble around the edges. I mean, just to give you an example, the Affordable Care Act that President Obama got passed, over a decade ago, everyone fought like cats and dogs about it, but it really was nibbling at the edges. I mean, I think for healthcare in this country to be accessible and affordable to people and to get them the care that they need, we would have to have comprehensive reform. And I don't think it's any secret that we don't do comprehensive anything very well in this political climate.
And when you talk about what comprehensive reform would look like, I've often, and I've said this and talked about this in other forums on other discussions about the fact that most people in America don't understand that we spend probably 60 to 70% of all of our money on healthcare for the first 3 to 4 months of life and the last 3 to 4 months of life.
You got it.
We don't pay a lot of attention to what's in the middle and where we can really truly impact. I mean, I would think that would be one of the biggest transformative things that the medical world could do, and it would be a boon for the amount of money. I mean, I'm just thinking about, if we focused in on, that 60%, or I'm sorry, 40% that are here and healthy, trying to keep them healthier so that when they go down, when we all reach the age where it's inevitable, we're all going to go. Um, you know, the idea of, and I look back on it, my dad had a profoundly robust life, man. I mean, the guy, multiple jobs, became the chief of the fire department for Baltimore City, had 4 or 5 cabinet posts that he served under. He was a secretary of transportation, secretary of public works. He did all these things for the city of Baltimore. I mean, and it took him 20 years to go to college. He went to college and he achieved so much in his life. But I'm going to be honest, he was, he worked up until 4 months before he died. Why? Because 4 months before he passed away, something went wrong. We don't really know exactly what was going on, but there was maybe he had a little bit of dementia. Something, he fell in his apartment. Nobody knew he'd fallen. He had a really severe bleed in the back of his brain. He survived that, but he was really not the same guy. And then it took him 4 months, almost 5 months to pass away. And, for the first, I don't know, month and a half, there were doctors throwing all this stuff. The guy was 93 years old. Come on now. Now, he had worked up until 93, and I'm not trying to say that my dad didn't deserve an extra couple of days, couple of months, but not at the expense that they were talking about things that needed to be done that they thought could be done that might give him another month. Okay. And I would have loved to have my father for another month. However, I was one that was like, dude, he's got to go to hospice and we've got to make his journey wherever he's going easier without having to put him through a whole bunch of stuff. And I think all of my siblings agreed, and that's what we ended up doing. But another family would have been faced with operation, surgery, this, that. Just the bills keep adding up. And it's like, excuse me, I've already said to my wife, like if something happens to me and it looks like the end, do not do anything extreme. It's going to cost even a penny to keep me around longer. Because at 90, I'm probably going to live to about 89, 90. My mother lived to 89. My father lived to 93. I've got other relatives in my family that have all lived, and I got an aunt right now who's I think 97.
Wow.
We have longevity in our lives, and she just happens to be still functional. She lives on her own. She has her children come by and visit her on a daily basis, but she lives on her own at that age. But for me, I'm not one of those people who are doomsday people or something, but dude, at 93, 94, it's time to go. Sorry.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think it's a societal issue more than the healthcare industry dictating to patients. I think patients actually don't think that there are any limits to what healthcare can do. We can fix anything, I think, in patients' minds, whether or not you're 90 or 93 and you have stage 4 cancer. I saw it all the time. I worked a lot in ICU environments. And most of the time, people wanted everything done. They thought that we could fix anything. And the fact of the matter is we can't. And, there are times when it's time to let go. And doctors have a hard time doing that if a patient's family wants to continue. It's a very difficult conversation to have.
Yeah,
And
I can imagine for you guys it would be an extremely difficult conversation to have. But at the same time, I think we as a society, as a species, we have to start having these conversations, especially now. I mean, where resources are so short, and we're losing funding everywhere. And it's not a matter of putting together a panel or something that picks and chooses who gets to stay and who doesn't. But I mean, I just think that philosophically, mankind has reached that point, like the Renaissance and other time periods in history, where we have to start having discussions about, okay, what is true life, and is life about being hooked to machines for 6 months, not being able to communicate, but somebody can come in and look at you and you can look back at them? That's not life to me.
no, no, it's not. And you're right. I mean, we used to say in the hospital all the time that it's not healthcare that we provide; it's sick care. And
Correct.
and I don't think that we actually devote the resources, to your point earlier, about keeping people healthy and practicing wellness and the things that we need to do. And a lot of it, I'm sorry to say, is because of the way insurance reimburses. They don't reimburse wellness, and real health
Which is
care.
so ridiculous, because I believe that if we as a nation led the way for the rest of the world, and made people understand that it's about, yeah, it might be about longevity, but it's about quality of longevity. So let's focus on how I can live the best me for 80 years. I'm not trying to say that 80's the end all, but if I get the, and here we got a person running for office that, is above that. But I just, it just seems to me that if we focus more on making sure that we got the most out of every second of the day that we could, because we were, as fit as we could be, as healthy as we could be. I mean, I'm I have a very close friend of mine who said, "You really piss me off every time you say this, Montel." And it is like, I recognize I'm, I can't even remember. I'm getting ready to turn 68 years old. I'm in the last quarter, man. I mean, whether I like it or not, I got to admit it. I'm in the last quarter. Now, I could still run a touchdown in the last second.
Yeah,
That's okay.
yeah,
That's cool. I want to be able
yeah,
to run that. I want going down the field. I'm running hard, baby. But I don't have to run that touchdown at 100. I'm sorry. I don't need you stretching me around. Now, if my wellness keeps me around that long, and I've been focused on taking good care of myself, like my aunt, who's, again, 96, 97. I don't even know. She may be 90, 97. I mean, she's robust. She's still there. She's lucid. She's talking. She cooks her dinner for herself every day. She gets herself up, gets herself down, gets dressed. Okay. I'm feeling that. That's still like a touchdown right there. Okay.
yeah.
However, if I am of extreme diminished capacity, I don't need anybody coming in with a sippy cup, at 96. I don't. I would prefer that you ease my way out of here. Let me hear the final buzzer, and, see you later. I've had a good time. Even to this point in time in my life, I feel like I've had a very, very, very good life. I'm happy, and I couldn't be, and no, I don't want to die tomorrow. However, what happens, happens. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm on exactly the same page you are. I really am. And after experiencing this for so many years in the hospital, I'm firmly there with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you know what I mean. It's really weird, and maybe I should say this for all of my listeners out here. I'm coming to this from the perspective of a person who has lived this incredibly rewarding life, but along the way, dude, I've almost left here 3 times. I've
Yeah.
almost died 3 times. As a matter of fact, I was declared dead once in a hospital, and they were able to revive me, bring me back. Then I get hit with a lifelong illness, something called MS, and then 5 years ago I had a major hemorrhagic stroke that
Hmm.
should have taken me out. I mean, everybody else that I know of or have heard of who had a similar stroke to mine, I was treated at one of the best, stroke hospitals in the country, New York Presbyterian. Even the lead doctor there said, dude, I'm telling you, you came like 100th of a centimeter away from dying, because I had a huge it was a class 3, class 4 hemorrhagic stroke in the back of my brain, and it was a cerebellar hemorrhagic stroke, and the blood missed my spinal cord by like 100th of an inch, and that's normally how they determine, because sometimes when it hits the spinal cord, that's when you're done. You know what I mean? And it missed it, and I fortunately have bounced back. I'm doing well. But I know what that sense of in my brain. I know what that sense of not being here was. I didn't wait. I had a stroke. I didn't wake up for like 2.5 days. Woke up 2.5 days. I didn't know who I was. And then when I woke up and I realized who I was, then I started getting better and I started working at it. However, I knew what that seemed to appear to be like, and it's happened to me before. It happened to me a couple of other times. I had a couple of other really severe medical emergencies that almost took me out of here, yet I'm still here. So I feel like I'm not living on borrowed time. I feel like, I got it. The medical world did for me what we expect them to do. They kept me here. I'm here. But, 20 years from now, I don't need you doing that for me. I'm just, that's me.
But I assume that experience, though, must have changed everything about the way
Oh,
you live life now, right?
without a doubt, without a
Yeah.
doubt, it made me not just, I hate using the term, look at the world half full, half empty. It changed my perspective on life. It changed my perspective on who I am. It changed my perspective on what my contribution is to our society. It changed my perspective on how I try to treat those around me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was extremely valuable for me, but it also, how can I say, it gave me a peace that I'm okay. You know what I mean? If I would hate to say it, I'm not going to say any what if this or what if that. If something happened to me, and I'm okay. I really, truly am. I've loved the life that I've had. I've loved the people that are my friends. I'll continue to love them in my own mind. The fact that I almost wasn't here and I'm now here, those final thoughts that sometimes people have, I think I've gone through 3 times. I've had those final thoughts, but I'm still here. So, hey, it's cool. And now,
Yeah, I've had that experience with transplant patients because they walk right up to death. It's almost like they've had a second life, and they've already had experience with having died once, but
yep.
we've saved them, and then they go on and they tell you the most amazing things. It's really been quite an education
Yeah,
to hear.
that's kind of, you just hit it, Gav. You just nailed it, because that's what I've said to myself sometimes. Been there, done that. I already been
Yeah,
there, done that. Got it. I understand. Okay. I'm moving on. I'm ready to go. Let's keep going. You know what I mean? Let's keep going. I'll keep
got,
going until I'm not going to be here. So, but I
got,
keep
got the
moving.
T-shirt, huh?
I got the t-shirt. I got the t-shirt right there. Right, written down. Yeah. But let's go back again and talk a little bit about switching from, fiction to nonfiction, or I'm sorry, from nonfiction to fiction. And then, that, of course, had to be a significant shift. What did you find to be the most challenging part of writing this novel?
I think mostly to make the characters three-dimensional. We all have 3 dimensions to us.
Yeah.
We're neither all good or all bad. And I wanted to make sure that the characters came alive on the page in 3 dimensions, and I should showing all of them, not just a little part of them.
Your
Not,
character, your character Joe Bosco, he sounds
yeah.
like a very fascinating character. How did you develop him, and what message did you hope readers would take away from his story?
Well, all of the characters, including Joe Bosco, were really based on people or combinations of people that I had worked with. So it was really easy for me to develop characters because some of the most brilliant but flawed people work in our field. You saw it all with these individuals, and when I got to writing a story, I just didn't have to look very far for the folks that I wanted to write about. And I think what you see in Dr. Joe Bosco, my protagonist, is a transformation. He starts in point A and he ends up in another point due to a lot of things that happen to him, some good, some bad, really bad, during the course of the novel.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us can relate to the idea of feeling lost and needing to start over. Your novel seems to touch on, some of the very human experiences. What do you think makes all that really matters stand out from in the realm of medical fiction?
Well, I think that it actually is more true to life. I've read a good bit of medical fiction. I see also TV dramatizations of medicine. I mean, I think one thing that I had the advantage of is I could actually say all of the situations that I write about in the book actually happened in a hospital setting. It's not science fiction. These things actually happen. These are real people that are fictionalized in my novel. And I think that that part makes it different from at least what I've read in this genre.
Okay. Well, now you've written for some of the biggest publications, appeared on some of the major news networks. How has your medical career influenced your writing style and the approach that you take to writing?
I think it is completely informed by what I saw in the hospital. I would walk around by myself sometimes late in the evening in the hospitals, and I felt like I had a person that I was talking to on my shoulder and saying, "Are you getting all this? Are you seeing all this?" And basically, I would write in a journal at night. And in doing so, I developed my first book. I didn't know I was developing my first book, but that's what I did. And so it's all about really peeling back this curtain and letting folks walk in the shoes of somebody that did the kind of work I did. That's the whole point of my writing, really.
Sure. Sure. What advice would you give someone who, let's say, they feel stuck and they're contemplating making a fresh start for themselves?
I think the best thing is to really self-examine. In order to actually make any progress, we have to do a lot of work. And I think this kind of work that you do is contemplative. It's really a look inside. And I think that without doing that, I personally would not feel whole, firstly. And then secondly, I don't think I could put any of it on the page if I didn't really examine what I was feeling myself first before I got to the stage of trying to put it on the page.
I mean, you touched on an excerpt, you touched on some of the most emotional moments of your career. Is there a particular story or a patient that stayed with you over, the years?
There's many. One in particular that I think really touched my heart is somebody that we transplanted very early in my career. She was about a week or two from dying, and we transplanted her. Her fictional name is Laura, and we transplanted her, and we saved her from certain death. This is a woman that had never been able to exercise, never had hardly gone outside as a young woman, age 18. And what she was able to do after the transplant, she hiked in Yosemite every single weekend. She did triathlons. She really squeezed everything out of life. And she did so for about 11 years that I cared for her. And I would get postcards and pictures of her. She ended up getting married and having a child of her own. And then her organs began to fail. And we had to put her back on the waiting list to try to do a second transplant. And she was the kind of person that knew her medical situation just as well as I did. I would actually come into the exam room when I would see her. I can still see her face. And she would actually be looking at the computer, looking up her own labs, checking her chest x-ray. So we got her back on the waiting list and we couldn't find organs in time. And she got so sick that she ended up passing away before we could do another transplant on her. And this was the ups and downs of what I did. On the one hand, we gave her an additional 11 years, but on the other hand, we couldn't get that second transplant done. And the emotional roller coaster of doing this kind of work was exemplified in just this one young lady. And we had a lot of instances where our team would save somebody in the afternoon and then lose somebody the next morning or the next night. And it was just up and down, up and down, up and down. And, as the leader of this team, I had to actually make sure that the team could move on. And we probably didn't spend enough time really processing what was happening to us. I don't think any of us did that, but we had to move on to the next patient because we had hundreds, if not thousands of other people we had to care for. That
And
was
did that cause kind of a PTSD in you after you left? Because, when you got out of that not rat race, but got out of that habit trail, run, and all of a sudden, okay, I can step away. Did that start to come back to haunt you or what?
I think it did. And, just to be frank, I actually talked to a therapist about it after I left the front lines of medicine for a few years. and we talked about the trauma, and that's what it was. I mean, there's no other way to really say it,
Yeah, because
you
like
know.
while you're in it, it probably didn't feel like trauma, but it
No,
was definitely trauma when you got out.
no, I mean, it just felt like my job, and that was my responsibility. But I ended up talking to a therapist afterwards, mainly just to talk through some of the profound responsibility I felt for the people that lived and the people that didn't live. And I think I got to the point where I felt like, look, the successes weren't all due to me and the failures weren't all due to me. And I really got to the point where I understood that, which was really helpful.
Right. Can you talk a little bit about the ethical dilemmas in high stakes medicine? I mean, can you share some specific ethical challenges that you faced and how you handle them?
Yeah, I talked about some of these in both of my books, but one in particular is the way transplant programs get scrutinized are all based on a 1 year survival statistic. That's how we get judged as transplant programs. And I think it incentivizes, unfortunately, programs to actually get that patient to 1 year, no matter the quality of life, no matter what we have to do to do that, and no matter what harm we cause to the patients and their families. And I think too often we're actually held to that very artificial 1 year standard. And it changes the behavior of the transplant programs, I'm afraid to say. And I don't like that part of how we judge transplant program quality. I wish we could come up with another way, because there's not a bright line between 364 days and 366 days,
Right.
but yet we have to meet that criteria, and programs have to show a certain 1 year survival in order to do that. And I think that that's unfortunate, and I think it causes behavior that's not good for our patients or their families.
Wow. You know, years ago, I interviewed a doctor. I bet you're probably familiar with him, Dr. Paul Pearsall. Do you remember him?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
Paul wrote the book, The Heart's Code.
yes.
I was so fascinated by that book. I had him on my show. As a matter of fact, we talked through the entire book, and that. Have you found any kinds of things like he talks about in that book, being the fact that he did a couple of they did a heart transplant for a young girl who ended up taking on some of the memories of the young girl who had been murdered. Have you heard any stories like that?
I have. I tell you, I've heard the craziest stories. I've had people um, develop different tastes, not only in their taste buds, but in their preferences for music, for film, for books, personality changes that are profound. I've also had the experience where people have actually passed away right in front of me and have come back and told me the stories about what happened. And they're unbelievable to hear. And I'm going to write about that one day.
Come on, give me one. Give me one. Talk about one of the stories. You don't have to say any names, but talk about one of the stories.
No, I can see the guy that had this. Basically, he was waiting on a heart and lung transplant. He died in our ICU. We did a bunch of things. We got him back, and when he woke up, I was standing at his bedside, and I said, "You're back now. You're safe. We got you. We're going to get you transplanted." And he said, "Why'd you bring me back?" And I said, "What do you mean? I mean, that's my job to bring you back." And he said, "You wouldn't believe how wonderful it is."
Wow.
And I said, what do you mean? And he said, "Everyone's there. Your dogs from when you were a kid, your parents are there. All your friends that have passed are there. It's wonderful."
Wow.
And, it got me thinking, as I would throughout my career, about life and death. And there's so many people. It doesn't sound like you're one of them, but there's so many people that really fear death. And it's probably because it's just unknown to them.
Right.
But I had patients tell me stories like this, that it really is a wonderful thing.
Well, I got to tell you, I had an experience, and this is around 20 years ago, where believe it or not, it's as crazy as it sound. I had a very strange abnormality. They don't know if it was a birth defect. It could have been caused from the fact that I was a boxer, but there's two big arteries in your face that draw blood into your nose. Well, one of mine burst, and I had this constant nosebleed, and so they ended up having to put me under. I was in a hospital in New York. They put me under, did, interventional radiological surgically, went up through my femoral artery, went up into my brain, into my face. Um, and right before they started the surgery, I literally, they rushed me into surgery. I was an 11-hour surgery for this thing. But I was bleeding profusely, just blood was squirting across the bed, and my heart stopped. And um, they had to bring me back a couple of times. They got me back to get me ready to go to surgery. And I remember very distinctly the entire conversation that took place in that room with all the doctors. As a matter of fact, when I survived this, I got out of the hospital, I actually invited all the doctors up to my home for a dinner because I wanted to thank them for, and everybody who was in that sort of emergency room or in that operating room, I invited them to dinner at my home. And it was very interesting because we had this conversation about what took place while they were bringing me back. And I remember distinctly who said what and what position they were in the room. And it kind of blew their minds a little bit because at the time that they were doing this, my heart was completely stopped. And, now does that mean I was really dead? No, because I had oxygen left in my blood that was probably feeding my brain, and my brain was able to catch pieces of this. I think, that's how I explain it. But the doctors who actually did this were like completely shocked because I've said, I remember you grabbed me, you pinched me so hard on my chest, and you grabbed me on my neck, and then you started, the defib thing, and then they brought in the paddles, and they were going, how do you know that? And I had it in the exact order. That was the first conversation I had about it. But I will tell you that during that period of time, rather than being in a state of panic, I was really just as chill as you can possibly think in my brain. Now, that body that was there was shaking around, and they were doing a lot of stuff trying to get me stable to get me into the operating room. But in my brain, I just remember, there was, I don't ever think that I saw this light, but I remember looking in the corner, and the doctor that did this said that I kept mumbling, looking off to my left. And I was having a conversation with someone who was telling me, it's not your time. I was like, what do you mean? I'm ready. No, it's not your time. And I was like, no, it's okay. Let's go. No, it's not your time. Not yet. And then I literally turned away from the corner and went in the operating room, got out of the operating room. And I remember it was emotional for me because I didn't know if I just imagined this or, if this was something that happened in a dream state or something. But then when I had that dinner and all the doctors that were there confirmed that had happened, I was like, wow, this is really trippy. Because again, the moment that I thought I was gone, it was peaceful. It was as peaceful as calming as anything that has ever happened in my life.
Yeah, I've heard all sorts of things like that, including, the sort of feeling that you're looking down on the whole scene.
Oh, no question.
You're detached from it. I mean, it's a remarkable thing.
Yeah, that one, that I will tell you, no ifs, ands, or buts. I right now can vividly remember the scene in that room. I can tell you where each doctor was standing in that room. And I remember it was almost, I was up above me looking down at me when they grabbed, remember this one doctor grabbed me on my chest and just twisted my skin really hard because he was trying to get me to, I had a bruise for 3-4 months in my chest from him doing that. And I remember the exact moment that he did that. And then the other guy grabbed me on the neck and they were like pinching me, trying to see if they could like get a reaction out of me. And I said that to him. They said, how did you know that? That was easily a minute and a half into us trying to bring you back. And I was like, did I remember that distinctly? And I even remember there was a nurse that was there who kept slapping me on the bottom of my foot. I was like, wow, you know what I mean? And I said that to them. They were like, they all looked at me like, you couldn't remember that. I remember that distinctly.
Incredible. I mean, it's an amazing phenomenon. This happened to me probably a dozen times in the hospital during the course of my career, and I walked around with it for months afterwards. It's
Wow.
amazing.
And so you're planning on writing another book talking about some of these experiences? Oh, that's gonna be great. Let me know when that comes out. All right.
Yeah,
Definitely got to
it's
get you back for that.
yeah, it's going to be based on this question that I asked every potential transplant recipient when I first met them. My nurses and the other doctors got tired of it, but I asked patients just to get them to talk with me, to figure out what they're all about. I asked them, "What would you do if today was your last day?" And I wasn't looking for a particular answer, but I wanted to get to know them a little bit, because the fact that they were seeing me meant that they wanted to continue living. I
Right.
wanted to know why they wanted to continue living. And, the things that people told me really informed the way I live my own life, because, you focus, if today really is your last day, you focus really on what matters most to you.
Correct. Yeah, and again, for the listeners out there, the book I was talking about earlier is a book called The Heart's Code by Dr. Paul Pearsall. You can go out and find it. I think it's still available anywhere the books are sold. Paul's unfortunately passed away. Um, However, it was a profound book. One of my higher rated shows, because there were so many examples of people who had gotten transplants and literally woke up from those transplants with almost in some cases different personalities. And you had said it earlier, like it was one person, I remember one woman who didn't like any kind of fried foods, hated pizza. As soon as they woke up, the first thing they wanted to eat was pizza, and it was
Yeah.
because the person who they got the organ from enjoyed pizza. And there was the stories. The book is well written and talks about things in ways that are just very fascinating.
Yeah. No, I agree. I remember reading that book when it came out. It was amazing.
Cool, cool. And with your background, you bring a really very, very, very interesting perspective to medical fiction. What would you do to achieve? What do you do to achieve in your writing? The things that are futuristic in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm always thinking about what's around the corner in medicine, and a lot of what I write about is more medical based drama, rather
Mhm.
than thrillers per se. I already have my third book underway, and I'm going back to nonfiction. I'm not sure what my fourth book is really going to be yet. I may go back to fiction writing though, and I'm trying to decide. My publisher would like to see me write these same characters that I have in All That Really Matters, my new novel, and follow them along a bit further in their journey. So I might go back to that.
And what have some of the people in the medical field thought about your book so far?
I've gotten great feedback with my first book, especially. I think a lot of the healthcare professionals, it came out after COVID, were experiencing some of the same emotional, ups and downs that I was experiencing during my career. And this new novel has just been out a week, and I'm starting to get feedback about it as well. I think the realism of it. I mean, it's a very real to life medical situation. Again, it's not science fiction.
Sure.
They always say fiction is a pack of lies that tells the truth, and that's what I wanted to achieve with this book.
Sure. One more time, get out the title and where people can go to get it.
It's All That Really Matters, and you can buy it anywhere that books are available. And if you go to my website, davidweill.com, there's links to all of them.
And you just said something about the fact that fiction is kind of I don't know, it's almost like the stepping stone into upcoming realities. If you wanted to kind of project ahead, I mean, and you're writing a new fictional book, what do you see coming down the pike in the near future that could turn into a reality?
I think the main things that we're going to be able to do in medicine is design a treatment, especially for you,
Mhm.
Montel, based on your genetic makeup, based on all the parameters, clinical parameters that you have. And there's going to be another one that's going to be different for me, David Weill. And I think it's going to get much more personalized. I don't think, I mean, take one example, the medication dosing that we take for high blood pressure or hypercholesterolemia. Those doses really are made up.
Random.
Uh, yeah, and we don't really know what the right dose to give anybody is. I think we're going to get much more specific with the therapy that we deliver, so that My therapy is for me, your therapy is for you. The doses of medications, the procedures we get, the genetic modifications that we can do is going to be much more personalized. I think that that's where medicine is headed. I think medicine 1.0 was everybody kind of gets the same thing, and we wait for people to get sick and then we treat them. Medicine 2.0 is really going to, I think, and 3.0 is going to be much more about how can we have better life. We're looking at life's, health span, not lifespan, and I think that that's where the innovation is going to happen. And it's not far away. It's really not. I mean, we have the tools. The problem is that a lot of the tools are very expensive and difficult to provide really for everyone. And that gets back to the access problem we talked about.
And I have one more question. What do you think the significance of AI is going to be when it comes to doing exactly what you just said, being able to find those personalized treatment protocols? Because I mean, it's like I'm working with I am. I guess I think I should have been a doctor in another life. I tell you, I honestly do believe that because I am so fascinated by medicine, technology, and things around technology. I'm working with a technology right now that is a basically a new version of an EEG on steroids, where this EEG is utilizing, I think it's 26, 27 leads, and it's RF, and it's about the size of a briefcase, and it literally compares scans to a repository of 400 or 500,000 scans. So, after doing a scan of a person's brains, they can basically, in an AI way, immediately compare that to 300,000 other scans, 400,000 other scans, and make some assessments or come up with some a prognosis that is based on looking at what other scans look like. I think that's amazing. I think AI is going to multiply that by 1,000. So when we start to be able to do that and do that very quickly, we'll be able to have our fingers on access to, well, this other 50,000 people seem to have an exact same configuration or figure,
Right.
so we're going to get answers quicker. I mean, what do you think how do you think AI is going to impact medicine?
I think in broad strokes, it's going to take the anecdotal practice of medicine away or reduce it, hopefully eliminate it. I mean, all of us as doctors, we're really influenced by the last patient that we saw. I mean,
Right.
we're heavily influenced by that. And I think what AI could do is actually bring more robust data to every medical clinical situation and take that bias that many of us have, bias in a way that we're so influenced by what we just saw yesterday or a week ago. And I think AI is exciting because it can actually, have reams and reams of data applied to the exact clinical situation and point you in the right direction. I'm really excited about what it could do for our field in transplantation, where a lot of when we pick organs for, are they suitable or are they not for donation, it's all based on our own personal experiences, our biases that we bring to it, and what happened last week. I'm really excited that maybe we can actually apply AI to the organ donor selection process and pick appropriate organs for folks rather than just having it totally based on our own anecdotal experience.
That's great. That's great. That's incredible. Well, sir, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. Actually, incredibly informative. Let's make sure we throw out another plug for people to sign up. Let your family members know that you want to be a donor, because donation of organs once you pass is really the gift of life for someone else, right?
I'm all for that. And please tell your family members that's what you want to do.
Thank you so much for being a part of the show. And for everybody out there listening, thank you so much for being a part of the show. David Weill's new novel is All That Really Matters. It's a compelling read that offers deep insights into the human condition. And until next time, I want you to keep thinking freely. Everyone, take care of yourself, take care of the families of yours out there. And let's join us on the next Free Thinking with Montel. Thank you again, David, for being a part of the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Have a great day. Thanks for joining me on Free Thinking with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please send us your comments.